Hey guys, it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you my favorite books that I read this year. I'm just going to start this off by saying this was so freaking hard to do, to pick out my absolute favorites of this year. My worst books of the year video already went up and I only had 6 books in that video and it was so easy to put them together. I knew exactly what books I wanted to talk about. This year I feel like I rated like 20 books 5 out of 5 stars, which is like abnormal to me. I don't usually just like rate books high or something. I just had a really great reading year. I've read so many good books, but I also realized as I was trying to like put them in an order and rank them that was just straight up impossible. I have such an interesting mix of books, like they're all different genres. They're just so different that you can't compare them. So that's my long-winded way of saying this video is not going to be in any particular order, but I do have some that are like favorites and then I have a couple of honorable mentions, but that's really the only distinction between the books. So yeah, I'll have them all linked down below in the description. I would highly recommend checking out these books. If you're going to take any book recommendations from my channel, this is the video to take them from because these were the best of the best. And I'm not trying to make this video super long because I have a lot to talk about, so let's just get straight into the video. I'm thinking maybe I'll do it in like a chronological order, like when I read them in the year. So that means the first book I'm going to be talking about is Scythe by Neil Shusterman, and I'm actually going to be talking about Scythe and its sequel Thunderhead, but I just realized today that I don't have a copy of Thunderhead. I think I originally listened to it on audiobook, so I just like never picked up a copy. These were some of my first reads of the year. I think it was January or February when I first read them, and I think I have a full book review up for Scythe if you want to check that out. But you know it's a good book when you read it literally 12 months ago, but it's still so clear in your mind and it still sticks with you, like everything that happened, but also just how much you loved it. When I was trying to put together this list, I was looking at books that, you know, I probably did really like at the time, but I've just forgotten about them. I won't talk too much about this one because I know it's super popular on BookTube, so you've probably heard about it, but it's basically about people who their job is to reap people when it's their time to die. And so we follow these 2 main characters who are apprentices of a scythe, so they're learning how to reap people and they're new to this job. And it's really interesting because you're learning like all of the politics, like it's an entire new world. It's so intricately made. I loved this whole world building. It was so freaking good. This was the first book by Neil Shusterman I've ever picked up, but I really want to go read some of his other books now because I was so thoroughly impressed by this. The only like major thing I wasn't happy about was the romance. I didn't dislike it, I just felt it was unnecessary, and I know a lot of people agree on that, but not enough that it made me dislike this book in any way. I just remember there were so many like plot twists and shocking moments. I like couldn't put the book down because every chapter ended on something that you were like, what? What's gonna happen? The tension was great. You were on the edge of your seat. This is a ride. This book is a ride. I would just really recommend this series. Kind of going off of that theme, my next book I'm going to be talking about is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I also have a book review for this. This is going to remain to be one of my favorite books, I think, for the rest of my life. I was just blown away by it. I know some people think it's overhyped, but I think it's worth the hype. It's an adult psychological thriller novel. If anything, read this book just so you can get to the end because the ending blew me away. That was like the best ending for a book I've ever read. Okay, so there's this man and he's a scientist and he makes this machine that allows people to travel to parallel universes kind of, and in every single one of those parallel universes like a different version of yourself exists. Like every possible way your life could have gone exists. And so one day our main character gets basically kidnapped by another version of himself because that version wants to take over this version of his life, and it's just, oh, I don't want to say anything else because I really don't want to spoil you. You just really need to experience this one for yourself. I have nothing but praise for this book. There was nothing I didn't like about it. Apparently I have book reviews for all of these, which I guess makes sense because I liked them so much. So I have a review for this next one, and that is The Way You Make Me Feel by Marine Gu. So this one really took me by surprise because I don't read a lot of contemporary. It's just not really my genre of choice, and this like cover screams contemporary. So I didn't have high expectations going into this, but I ended up falling in love with it. It's about this girl who's kind of like the class clown troublemaker, and she gets in really big trouble with her parents for doing this huge prank at the end of the school year. And so instead of going on this big trip with her mom like she had planned for the summer, her dad is making her stay home and work in his food truck alongside a girl at school that she absolutely hates. And so it's one of those like summer contemporaries. There's a romance, but I just feel like this book has so much more depth to it than other like cutesy summer romance contemporaries, you know? It's about the relationship between her and her father and her like slowly starting to understand this girl that she hates, and also like the romance and stuff. But she's also, I think she's like Korean and Chinese or something, so there's just like a lot of really cool stuff about her culture and like the food they like and stuff like that, and like the traditions she has with her father. It was just a very unique book, which I really enjoyed. And her mom is this like really famous social media influencer who's like never around. It was like a breath of fresh air. I just haven't read anything like it, and if you like contemporaries, you will love this. The next book I have to talk about is actually a collection of poetry, and that is Helium by Rudy Francisco. I read this over the summer, and it was actually one of you guys who recommended this to me, and I cannot thank you enough for exposing me to this poetry collection because I'm obsessed with it. It's hard to really talk about poetry because you just like can't. If you're trying to get into poetry, try this one out and see if you like it, because I just can't imagine a situation where someone wouldn't like this. Okay, so I'm just gonna read you one of the poems because I really liked this one. This one's called To You, and it's on page 50. He puts guilt in the air and waits for you to breathe, tries to tailor the blame until it looks like it fits you, turns the story into a gymnast and convinces it to flip. He rewinds the movie, excavates the plot, digs out your patience, makes himself the narrator and the hero. He sketches you as the antagonist, and suddenly his transgressions become deleted scenes. He blames you for his sadness, and this is how the wolf cries boy. So good. You just read it. Just read it. The next book I have to talk about is This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. I love her writing. I love her world building. Everything about her books is just wonderful. She's just such a good writer. And I read this over the summer, and I still haven't picked up the sequel, and I don't really know why. But This Savage Song is very popular, so you might know what it's about. But basically, it's in this world where violent acts create monsters, and there's different types of monsters for different types of crimes and whatnot. So like if it's like a really atrocious violent act, like a school shooting, like a worse monster comes out of it than like some guy gets like beat up on the street. And so we follow two different point of view characters. One of them is the daughter of this like guy. He's like a leader. He's in like a leadership position. I can't even really remember. I think he's like a general or something. And their like mission is like to take down all of the monsters and stuff. And then our second point of view character is actually one of these monsters who, as you can imagine, is like very humanized. And you kind of see the other side, like these creatures didn't ask to be created, like it's your own fault for doing all of these violent acts, and you like really feel sympathy for this monster. I loved this. I blew through it. I couldn't put it down. I would just highly recommend this and all of Victoria Schwab's books. The next book I have to talk about is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This book was so unique and so interesting. So it's written in verse, it's written in poems, but it's not a poetry collection. Like it is like a narrative, and it's about this girl who's from Harlem, New York, and she is starting to get into slam poetry. So you're kind of reading her story and her own poetry as she's like joining the club at school and like getting into it and stuff. Her mom is like super religious and super conservative and won't let her do things, and it's kind of her finding herself, standing up for herself against her mom, and also kind of coming into herself and learning about this new passion that she has. So it's kind of like a coming of age story in verse, which I just really enjoyed. I love slam poetry, so it was just so interesting to read. I would definitely recommend the audiobook for this one though, because I just feel like slam poetry is so much more powerful when you hear it, especially if it's read by the person who wrote it. So listening to the audiobook, it was literally like I was sitting at a slam poetry reading, and it was so powerful, and I just cannot get over. I just love slam poetry, like anyway. So this book, listening to the audiobook, was just such an experience like nothing else I've read in YA. The book itself is awesome, but the audiobook performance is fabulous, so I would just really recommend that. The next couple that I have to talk about, I don't have a physical copy with me because they're at school, so I'll put a little picture up here. But the next one I'm going to be talking about is called The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down, and I think the author was Anne Feidman. So this is actually a nonfiction, I'm trying to think of like the actual technical word for it, I think it's ethnography, and I had to read this for my global public health class, and I loved this book. It was life-changing. It was so powerful. I know that this book is actually required reading for most medical schools, I think. If you want to become a doctor, you're gonna have to read this book, because essentially it's about this Hmong family who has a very young daughter who's suffering from a really bad case of epilepsy. They barely speak any English, they're completely illiterate, and they don't really understand Western medicine aside from like antibiotics, and so they keep bringing her daughter to the hospital for help because they're like really worried about her. It's like a very severe case of epilepsy. And so the story is about not only the like really bad language barrier between the hospital and them, but also the cultural barrier and how they have these beliefs about their daughter's soul, and they don't want like certain procedures done on her, and they want to bring in like traditional healers from their culture to help and stuff, and the hospital like isn't gonna do that. So it's just this very interesting clash of cultures. It's very sad. It has a good ending, but it's like very sad to watch how everyone has good intentions, like no one's trying to be malicious, but how this kind of situation, which happens all the time, can result in preventable things. I'm being vague because I don't want to spoil you. Even though it is nonfiction, it reads like a novel. It's super fast, it's super easy to read, and I just adored it. I just came out of it feeling like I learned a lot, which I really like, but I was also like thoroughly entertained, and I really cared about the people in this book. I would just really recommend this one. Next, I'm going to be talking about The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I had to read this from one of my classes, and I did like a 20-page research paper on it. I am so in love with this book and the brilliance of this book. I know so many people had to read it for required reading in high school, so I'm really glad that I finally had a class that had it as required reading, because I don't know if I ever would have picked it up on my own. But this book, there's just so many things to love about it. It's just so smart, it's so relevant. I just think it's such an important book to read. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this because it's also been made into a Hulu series, which I have watched, but it's very different from the book. Not like super different, but I think the book is better, and I would just really recommend reading the book. It's so well written. It's just I like was in awe after I finished it. And then the next book I'm gonna be talking about is Semiosis by Sue Burke. This book like blew my mind. It was so much better than I was expecting it to be. It's this science fiction utopian book where essentially people have decided to go colonize a different planet because Earth has become like super toxic and people are just sick of all of the violence, so they're like, you know what, we're just gonna go start a new utopian society on this random planet. And the book is told in generations, so I think there's only 7 chapters, and you get like the first generation and then their kids and then their kids and then their kids, so you get to see the progression of this society. And the planet's dominant species are plants. Like, plants are super freaking smart. They like get the animals to do what they want to do. They like grow fruits that have like certain chemicals that like mess with your mind, so then you like automatically do whatever they want you to do. It's so cool, but it's also just a really smart social critique on how we treat our planet, how we treat plants and all that kind of stuff. And I just, it was so good, you guys. You should read it. I really enjoyed it, and apparently there's gonna be a sequel. It's an adult science fiction novel, if I didn't already say that, but super easy to read, super fun. I would also recommend the audiobook for this one, but I just really liked the way it was told and seeing the different generations and kind of how things change. And you like still see characters from the previous generations, obviously, if they're still alive. So just a really good book, really unique. I've never read anything like it. Okay, so those are all of the books that I don't have here with me, so I'm gonna go back to the physical copies, but those were all of the favorite books, so now I'm just gonna do some like honorable mentions. I gave both of these 5 out of 5 stars, but like I was saying with that first book, Scythe, I read Scythe, that was like one of my first reads of the year, but I still vividly remember everything about it, and so I was looking at my Goodreads page and which books I rated 5 out of 5 stars, and some of them I couldn't remember at all. I couldn't remember why I liked them, I couldn't really remember what happened in the book, and so I was hesitant to put them on this list if I can't even remember it, you know? If it was that forgettable, like how great really was it? I don't know, that was kind of the way I thought about it. So the honorable mentions that I have are Restore Me by Tahira Mafi and Legendary by Stephanie Garber. These are both books and series that I've loved in the past. This is part of the Shatter Me series, and this is part of the Caraval series. But like, I already knew I was gonna like these books because they were sequels to series that I love, and I already love these characters, and I know I like these authors' writing styles. But again, these are sequels, and I can't remember anything that happened in either of them, honestly. I remember enjoying my reading experience, but I don't remember much else. And I didn't read them that long ago. So they're honorable mentions because I gave them 5 out of 5 stars at the time, and I obviously liked them, but I don't remember them enough to like talk about why I liked them. So yeah, those were all of my favorite books that I've read this year. Make sure to leave a comment down below with your favorite, absolute favorite read of the year if you were able to rank them unlike me. Especially if you have also read one of the books that I talked about today, I would love to know. I'll leave a link down below in the description to my worst books of the year video if you missed it. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today. So make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. It helps out my channel a lot, and subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. If you want to stick around, I would love to have you. I'm a little out of breath. That was a lot to say, so I'll just see you guys in my next video very soon. Bye.